Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Chrism, and I'd like to welcome you to this Kundalini conversation about your Kundalini experiences. And today I'd like to discuss with you about the Christ consciousness and some of the other aspects of Kundalini. And first of all, though, I'd like to welcome you all, and I'd like to welcome those of you that are listening in the archives, and I'd like to welcome those who are listening on Facebook and the other various areas here. I believe we have some people in the chat room, and so I'd like to say hello to everybody there and express my gratitude for the fact of your listening into this conversation. Hopefully it will be helpful to you. And so here we go. Oh, and I've asked some of the people on Facebook and in the chat room here if the sound quality is good. So if you can comment on that, let me know that I'm not just talking to the air, but it's actually going out there. Sometimes we have a problem with it. So here we go. Let us begin. Christ was really teaching about Kundalini. These things I do, you can do and more. The kingdom of heaven is within. It's very important, I feel, for people to begin, if you're a Christian, but even if you're of any religion and you're looking into the Kundalini, you think you might have the Kundalini, the idea of Christ consciousness is a very important aspect to this conversation. Not just to the conversation, though, but also to the way you relate to yourself and to other people. The Kundalini teaches us many of of what Christ was talking about, such as, these things I do, you can do, and more. And, this is a very important statement to make, because he's not just saying that, you can do everything I can do, you can do everything I can do, and more than what I am showing you. And more. Think about what that could be. This was a person who was purportedly walking on water, making water into wine, healing the sick, raising the dead, some very, very strong levels of phenomena that this person symbolizes, at least in contemporary times. And so you can do those things too, and more. But these are just some of the phenomena-based offshoots of what the Christ consciousness is. And the Christ consciousness is an extremely high level of love, the frequency of love. But it's not, the cotton candy, super sweet levels of love. It is more wisdom-based love that is a form of a lifestyle of expressed love. I mean, if you look at the love of a parent, if you look at the love that you had for a best friend, if you look for the understandings that a husband and wife in love with each other have, that with just a look can communicate a volume of information. If you wrap all of those up into one form of consciousness, then you begin to reach into what we understand as the Christ consciousness, or what we try to understand as the Christ consciousness. Christ consciousness comes through Kundalini. You must have gone within to at least be able to experience some aspect of the kingdom of heaven within, and activated the Kundalini, or activated the fire of Christ. This is it's almost beyond words. It's hard for me to find the words to really describe this from a Kundalini perspective, because it is so big, it is so broad, it is so powerful. But just bear with me, and I'll try to do that with you today. Christ consciousness is so transformative that you don't begin to live your life the way you have before. You live your life from a heaven-based perspective. You live your life and you interrelate with other people from a loving perspective, but an exalted perspective. And by exalted, I don't mean that you're towering over people or that, you're so holy that you can't communicate with them. You can communicate very, very well with people within Christ consciousness, very well, and on the level that they can understand too. You're not a towering intellect, using communication methods that are so far beyond them. It's not that kind of a power. It's a series or a suite of communication levels that speak to the soul as well as to the ego, speak to the mind as well to the heart. And so this kind of an understanding allows people, wherever they are at in their spiritual life, in their mental life, in the maybe the survival-based patterns of life that they're living right now, it allows them to understand. It allows them to feel the blessings of the consciousness that is coming through the Word. This is the Word made flesh, or the divine Word from the divine flesh. And it's not just for Christians. Christ spent a lot of time in India as well, as some of the research suggests. And matter of fact, he spent, I think, most of his 20s in the India area, visiting with the different masters of the time there as well. And so he had a fairly clear understanding of Kundalini. And so when you take that into perspective and you begin to apply this to your life here and now, in the contemporary times, what is it you must do? Well, of course, the first thing you must do is you must nourish your Kundalini. You must nourish the force that causes you to have that expressive fire of Christ, that expressive consciousness of Christ, the Christ consciousness. And so that's the first thing you do. You nourish your Kundalini. And of course, if any of you have listened to the previous programs, you'll know that I'm going to support the Kundalini Awakening Safety Protocols, the Kundalini Safeties. And you can get there online at www.kundalinisafeties, all one word, .com. So KUNDALINASAFETIES.com. Okay, so go there, read them through completely 3 times, and begin to incorporate them into a practice within your life. St. Francis of Assisi had the Christ consciousness, and he passed that consciousness on to St. Giles. St. Teresa of Avila had the Christ consciousness. St. John of the Cross had the Christ consciousness. These saints had the Christ consciousness, and one of the main attributes of Christ consciousness is the service to humanity. And it's not, you can be in the soup kitchen passing out the soup, but it's also, using some of the parables of Christ, teach a man to fish rather than giving a man a fish, so he eats for a lifetime instead of just that one day. These types of qualities can begin to be incorporated into your conversations with humanity today, regardless of your religious perspective. Christ consciousness teaches us to serve humanity. And, one of the ways of serving humanity is to teach people how not to do some of the disastrous things that they do to themselves, like overindulging in alcohol or recreational drugs or poisoning the land. A lot of the Christians now, they like to consider themselves as stewards of the land, and, basically they're just poisoning the land because they're more interested in tonnage and commercialism than they are in taking actual care of the land and supporting the land. This is part of Christ consciousness, is to provide corrective measures that will allow people to shift their perspective away from greed and away from avarice and away from jealousy and away from negative levels of competition that only hurt everyone involved, not just the target, but also the perpetrator. Christ consciousness sets a new pattern of behavioral expression upon this world, in the same way that the Kundalini does. When you have the Kundalini, those of you who know what I'm talking about, you feel the Christ consciousness within you. You may not attribute it directly to Christ, but those who are familiar with the teachings of Christ will definitely feel that need to expound upon the virtues and the morality and the high ethics that come with Christ consciousness. And some people may come up to you and say, oh, well, if you've got Christ consciousness, then let's see you walk on water, or change that water into wine, or make the bread out of rocks, and, things of that level. They'll try to diminish it by bringing you down to their lower vibration. And, it just doesn't make any difference to the Christ consciousness, because imbued within Christ consciousness are strong levels of forgiveness. Now, you have to understand that not everything in the Bible is worth, how should I say it? There is a secret path within the King James Version of the Bible, and that is a secret path to Kundalini awakening. And so you need to look past the violence, past the retribution, past the responses to the various lower ethical types of expressions that you can read within the Bible. You have to separate the wheat from the chaff, as someone said earlier today. The wheat from the chaff. Think about what that means. And as you consider what that means, as you consider what the wheat from the chaff actually means, what that means, that you have to discern, that there are levels of discernment that have to occur. And within those levels of discernment, you have to let the Christ consciousness feel. You have to feel what it's telling you in regards to how you separate the, shall we say, the lower vibrational consciousness from the Christ consciousness. And in feeling that discernment level, you're able to separate the wheat from the chaff. Now, I've been trying to desperately to go to Facebook here and bump up that post that was written to really begin to speak about the Christ consciousness. But it's hard for me to. It's hard to do this work and to work the computer at the same time. I don't know if you understand what I'm talking about, but it's very difficult to to split my focus. So I'm just not going to do it. The Christ consciousness is very important to our society right now. You're going to have many people have, groups have written about it, and they really don't include the most important component of the Christ consciousness, and that is the Kundalini. Waking the Kundalini, going into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights, teaching people how to fish rather than giving them a fish. These are all classic examples of Kundalini service and trust. Going into the desert with no water and no food and surviving is total trust in Kundalini, total trust in the divine perspective and its effectiveness in allowing us to survive within impossible areas. Okay, so the first place to look really is your Kundalini. So if you want to walk in the footsteps of Christ, you have to awaken the Kundalini. That is the first gate. And to kind of summarize a little bit here with what Christ did, Christ is born, and we're I'm not going to even go into the virgin birth or anything of that nature. What I am going to go into is that after he is on this world, and he's basically secreted away. Nobody knows what happened to him when he was 10. Nobody knows what happened to him when he was 15. That hasn't written down. His teachings basically start when he's around 34. I'm going to suggest that he was in the process of dealing with a Kundalini activation that he was born with, and then working with that Kundalini, perhaps in India, and really beginning to fine-tune some of the aspects of his grace at the time. And then once he reached a certain level of experience and wisdom and the ability to really focus divine communication and divine interaction, boom, then he comes on the scene in the Middle East and begins to produce teachings for people. And there was more than one person doing those teachings at that time. It wasn't just Christ. There were other people, and I used to know the name of it back in my earlier Kundalini experiences. There was another person out there doing the same thing. St. John the Baptist also had the Kundalini. This is why Christ came to him. So St. John the Baptist was one person, and he also, the hymn to St. John the Baptist, which was an activation hymn that a piece of music that if you heard it, it would activate your Kundalini. And of course, that kind of music using solfeggio frequencies has been lost. I don't think it's been lost. I think it's been hidden because, certain organizations, they don't want you to have your Kundalini awakened. They do not want you to have Christ consciousness. You're much easier to manage without having Kundalini or without having the Christ consciousness. And they want to manage you, to use you, to harvest you, in certain ways that doesn't upset the order of this planet and its peoples upon this planet. And so, there is that force there that you have to contend with. But St. John the Baptist, baptizing the Kundalini or baptizing the Christ and other people was actually activating people. For some people, St. John the Baptist was the was the perpetrator of divine evolution within Christ. Although I that doesn't I don't get truth from that within my grace. My grace basically says he was born activated and had to learn how to use those skill sets in the body at the time from different areas of geographies, not just from the Essenes and not just from, strictly from India, but in other places too. And so it's really important for you to understand the importance of Kundalini within this understanding of Christ consciousness. You're here in this society. In this society, similar but not the same as the society at the time of Christ, 2,000 years ago. War is being made on people, which is kind of a constant theme with humanity. But domination of one personality over another personality or group of personalities over other groups of personalities. These types of refinement strategies are still in play right now in our society. People in this world right now, contemporary, are starving. People in this world are living under the lie. They don't know the truth, and they're being forced to subjugate themselves to lies and to live through lies rather than living through the understandings of truth. You are in an era that is just as significant right now today as Christ was 2,000 years ago. This is why it is so important for you to activate your Kundalini and to bring yourself into an active, expressive awareness of Christ consciousness. It's extremely important for you to do so. Now, I'm small potatoes. None of these governing bodies are going to be threatened by me at all. And since I have lots of people like what I'm saying, and lots of people don't like what I'm saying too. And so there's a bit of balance there that gives some of the governing agencies a bit of comfort that they can, come in and not shut us down. Same with you. You don't need to worry about being crucified on a cross like Christ was. That's not Christ consciousness. And neither did Christ shed his blood for our sins. That's more chaff that was separated from the wheat, if you can do that through your levels of discernment. Separating the wheat from the chaff. And for those of you that don't know what chaff is the covering of the actual nut of wheat, the seed of the wheat that we use for flour. The chaff is that covering that we don't really use, it's not digestible in that sense. And so that's why it is separated from the actual wheat seed itself. Okay, separating the wheat from the chaff is the same as separating the truth from the lie. Okay, and that is the context that I'm using it in. So as you look into Christ consciousness, as you look into the awareness of what it is to walk in the footsteps of Christ, first look into your ability and your awareness within the Kundalini that you have dormant at the base of your spine for some of you, and for some of you, activated and moving through your spine. And for some others of you, you won't need me to tell you. Your divine connection is already set within the awakened aspect. And yet some of you also need to hear it. As you're driving your cars, you're going to work, you can have the Christ consciousness in expression all the time, every day. Christ was not inhuman. Christ was a human being with one foot in heaven all the time and one foot on this world all the time. And that's exactly where the Kundalini brings you. So for those of you that have it awakened or activated within you and you're struggling, this is what Christ consciousness is. It's about surrendering completely to the changes that are coming to you by virtue of having one foot in heaven and one foot on the earth. Heaven is not so easy. Heaven is not so easy. You have to really begin to sacrifice what you've spent your entire life honing your ego towards. Now, if you were born with the Kundalini in an active state, you still have to go through, the difficulties of life. You still have to learn what it is to be in pain, and learn what it is to be in pleasure, and learn what it is to earn a gift, and learn what it is to give a gift, and learn all of these attributes of human experience and behavior. You don't get to sidestep any of this. In order to really reach people within Christ consciousness, you have to be a person that has gone through and is going through the different levels of expression that human beings in your culture go through. So if you're living in a primitive society, let's say you're living deep in the Amazon, well, you don't have a lot of experience with, say, Western European morals and ethics. Well, you have to practice the morals and ethics of the society that you live in. And what is right to that society is right to your Christ consciousness, and what is wrong is wrong. But for those of you that are familiar with Christ and that are familiar with living within a society where if you kill somebody, that's wrong. If you steal something, that's wrong. If you're going into jealousy, it's not something that's going to help you. It's not going to help other people. And so these are wrongs that can be corrected. I don't like to use the word wrong. You can use the word mistaken instead of wrong. But you have to experience these things in order to correct them, in order to know the difference between the two. And then, most importantly, once you know the difference between the two, is to self-correct yourself towards that aspect that is a gift of love. And this involves really knowing what love is. Let's go back to Christ as the example. And Christ, he came into that money changer's temple, and he was, very angry, throwing stuff around. He wasn't calm, cool, and collected. It's like, oh, you guys, you shouldn't be doing this. It's not right. No, he was kind of like destroying the place, and I'm surprised that he didn't get arrested right then and there. Maybe he did. They let him go. So sometimes tough love is just as important an aspect of love as soft love or love that is, kind, caring, compassionate, considerate. Tough love can be those qualities too. So you have to understand that your idea of love needs to be expanded. A very, very, very broadly expanded expression of love. This is part of the Christ consciousness. This is part of the Christ consciousness too. And so when you see a parent, not sparing the rod for the child, or not sparing the hand to correct the child, this is a form of tough love. This is a form of saying, hey, don't touch the hot stove. If you touch the hot stove, you're going to burn your hand. That aspect of love needs to be expressed by a person walking in the footsteps of Christ. In addition to the compassionate, kind, considerate, and soft areas of love as well. The hard and the soft both need to be expressed in ways that reach everyone, not just, one person, but many people. And yet it feels like the person who is receiving it is, it's just there for them. So in a sense, you have something that is being broadcast to the entire population, but each individual within the entire population feels that they're being spoken to directly. This is the Christ consciousness. This is the consciousness of Kundalini. The consciousness of Kundalini, too. Remember, I'm using Christ consciousness, and I'm using Kundalini awakened, and let me say this, a rose by any other name still smells as sweet. Call it whatever name you want. Call it Kundalini awakened. Call it divine expression. Call it Christ consciousness. It all means the same thing, and it all narrows down to Kundalini consciousness. Kundalini awareness. And so a person outside of Kundalini will simply say, well, how come then, you don't see all these Kundalini people walking on water or, raising the dead or doing these things that we read that Christ was done? Well, once again, you need to separate the wheat from the chaff. How much of that was just stories made up in order to build a certain position, a certain opinion about a certain symbol within society at that time? The 5th century and the Council of Nicaea and what they decided were appropriate stories of Christ to go into what eventually became the Bible and what was not to be added into that. So, of course, we have the Apocrypha. These are the forbidden books that didn't make it into the Bible because a bunch of men got together and decided, well, let's see, well, what do we want here? We want this, we want that, kind of like a backroom board meeting. All they were lacking is cigars, but I'm sure they had other things. I want you to join this conversation if you're interested in this topic. And you can join this conversation by calling in, and the call-in number is area code 347-850-8464. 347-850-8464. And I do have some callers right here, and I'm going to go right on over here. And I believe this could be our Mother Superior in existence here. This is our Kundalini activated Mother Superior. Hi, Rosemary.
Hi there, Chrism. Very wonderful.
What do you think?
Yes.
Is this making any sense to you? Because you studied the Bible for 25 years.
Well, not
or
quite,
more.
but I totally agree with everything that you said. Without having researched it myself, it doesn't take anything away from a person's belief in who Christ is and what he was doing and who God is. But none of that. It just brings us into that in the way that I was taught, or people who wanted it to be that way, that we would just be doing all of those things. But they didn't have the awakening themselves. They didn't have the tools. They didn't have the knowledge. And so you're telling me today things that I would have flourished spiritually had I heard, as a young sister. But it wasn't. It was the traditional Roman interpretation.
Right. The Roman interpretation that was expounded and created by the Roman emperor of the time, which would have been Constantine, right? Emperor Constantine. He's the guy that said, hey, God, there's so many Christians they're coming out of the woodwork here. Let's organize them and control them.
Yes,
right?
Yes. And how are we going? It's the Roman Empire. My understanding was doing that by who it was, but once that was gone, then it was fear of how are we going to manage these people?
Exactly.
And a thing of a size and growing civilization. But they didn't have those words or that understanding. But that's exactly what my understanding of what happened, of how the church got to be the way it was the way of managing the people. And
managing the population. Go ahead.
And not in ill will, but that they need to be managed, because they would, I guess, be hurting and killing each other or die. I have to go back and think what it was like without any control. And there was, I don't know, but this is the way it unfolded and the way our divine Kundalini allowed it to as well, I think. Because
there, you see, now you're hitting the nail on the head. I mean, you can certainly say that, well, the powers that be at the time, they didn't want anybody having Christ consciousness, because the people would become so galvanized by that consciousness and having so many different Christs all over the place saying the same thing. That's going to take us out of power. In order for us to stay into power, we need to control this. In order to control this, we need to control the type of information that comes through. And so one of the things that was lost at that time was the hymn to St. John the Baptist, using those special solfeggio frequencies that would have helped people activate their Kundalini just by listening to it. Just by listening to it. I mean, but even now, today, you can listen to people that have the Kundalini singing or talking and have the same thing occur. And so in a way, the technique is not lost. Just that perhaps St. John's version of that technique may not be available to us at this time. But we have Kundalini awakened people, Kundalini awakened teachers, who are able to do this. Yogananda, you listen to some of the 1940s recordings of Yogananda. Some people feel very, very attached to the frequencies of his voice. Some people have said that about my voice as well, that when they hear that voice, the Kundalini in the voice, it triggers a Kundalini event within themselves. And so, I suggest by all means, listen to people that have the Kundalini at a specific frequency. Listen to them and allow that information to trigger your own frequency of Kundalini expression. Now, with regards to Christ, so many of his miracles were really based in divine intervention. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, within himself.
Right. The kingdom of heaven is within. And so, let's change the water into wine. Now, frankly, I don't like the taste of alcohol, but maybe they did at the time, and so maybe it was non-alcoholic wine. What do you think, Rosemary?
I don't know. I haven't given that any thought.
Yeah, the fact of like instant fermentation, but different taste for different folks. But raising people from the dead, let's just talk about that one for a little bit. Part of the consciousness is to lift people up from within. Those who are dead are also, they're dead to hearing anything of a divine nature, and having no energy, having no life is equivalent to a level of death. And then to be filled with grace and to be filled with understanding and to be filled with energy is also a way of bringing life to the dead, lifting up people out of ignorance, is lifting them up out of a level of death that, they walk through their entire life. Do you understand what I'm saying? Really? So anyway, I just wanted to say hello to you. I see that you've called in. And is the sound coming through okay?
Yes, it's very well. Thank you.
Could I have my special headphones on? All right, my dear, I'm going to go ahead and bring you into the sacred masculine blue here. And thank you for responding. And here we go. And it looks like I might have another caller here. And hello, area code 808-968. You're on the air. Did you have a question or are you listening? Area code 808-968-70. All right, so I'm going to assume that you're listening here. And then coming into the other caller here, we have area code 917, prefix 538. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. What can you say about relationships and how they can work when
go ahead.
when one of them isn't quite ready and the other doesn't want to move on?
Okay, so is this inside of Kundalini at all or not? Does it matter?
It doesn't matter.
Okay, so one person is ready to have a relationship and the other person is not ready to have a relationship, right?
Yeah.
But you added something else about moving on and
Yeah. I mean, if the person that is ready doesn't want to move on.
Doesn't want to leave the potential relationship. Let me ask you this. I'm getting some pictures here. So we're talking about a married couple, and or people who are in a relationship already, and one person doesn't want to move on. One person likes the relationship, and the other person doesn't. Right?
Yeah, one person isn't ready to have a relationship and the other person is ready to have a relationship, so they could continue on as friends or
but they don't want that. They don't want to move on. They don't want to move on away from that potential relationship, right?
Yeah, they like each other.
What I'm going to suggest is that you just don't push it. Is there a time clock on this relationship? Someone going to die next week?
No.
Another thing that's coming to me right now is that old bit of wisdom that is not always easy to take. If you love someone, let them go. If they come back, then it's meant to be, and if they don't, it wasn't ever meant to be.
But they always come back.
Well, if they come back, then there is a potential chance for that to occur, and then you can apply levels of patience and levels of considerate understanding. It's like, why do they come back, and why don't they want to have a relationship? What part of them is resisting that relationship, right?
Right.
What part of them is resisting it, and why? Do you know? Why are they resisting it?
Yeah, because of certain aspects of what the other person is showing. So then there's work to be done.
Are the aspects like debilitating aspects? Are they like an alcoholic or a drug addict, or they don't have work, they don't have financial resource? What are the other aspects? Do
just
they not
the
want
way
to
somebody reacts to certain things could be too dramatic.
Oh, okay. And so like, say, an anger issue, somebody gets really angry, kind of over the top angry?
Kind of over the top, upset, and then leaves the relationship and then regrets that and then comes back.
Oh, I see. And the person that person gets mad at stays within the relation and allows that to occur, right?
Yeah.
That would be you, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So patience and forgiveness. If you want to have a relationship with this individual, you understand that they can become extremely over the top, enraged at, say, kind of a silly thing that they shouldn't do, that really shouldn't bother them so much. And then you realize they oh my gosh, I was so over the top. Oh my God, I owe her an apology, and let me bring her some flowers, right?
Right. Something like that.
Right. And your question is really what? Sounds like you're already doing it. You already have. Well, you have the temperament where you realize that he's going to come back. He just blew his top. He's going to come back, and he's going to apologize, and you're going to say, "I'm going to accept him," right?
Well, usually he accepts me.
Are you the one that blows your top?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. So what's causing you to cash in so strongly with your emotions? Why do you what happens?
I think it's because he doesn't commit fully to me.
And you want him to commit, and he's not committing, but you want him to commit, and he's not doing it. He's not doing what you want.
He's not ready. He's not ready.
Well,
that's right.
do you have the is it the biological clock that's ticking away that bothers you so much?
Oh, maybe the biological clock is gone already.
Well, then what's your rush? What's your rush? I mean, is he seeing other people?
No.
Well, then.
If he does, then I leave. If he does, then that we're not together.
Well, so there you have it. There you have it. You need to get a control over your emotions.
Yeah.
You need to form levels of patience and tolerance.
Right.
And
I told him I'll work on that, and maybe you'll find it a little bit easier to forgive me.
Well, listen up. Isn't he already committing by taking you back each time you blow your top?
Each time he takes me back, yes.
Well, isn't that a form of commitment already?
He always says, I like you. Otherwise, I would never talk to you.
Right. So what part of that commitment isn't enough?
But then he says that it drives him crazy and that we'll never be together, that he'll never be together with me. There's no future, and blah, blah, blah.
Well,
he's probably very upset.
Right. So the fact that he does continuously take you back kind of negates what he says about never having a relationship. There is a relationship.
Lately he's been saying that we will never have intimacy again, because it always goes back to this emotional stuff that I do. But it has nothing to do with, maybe it does, I don't know.
Well, I think you have a relationship, and therefore commitment has been established, number one. Number two, the inner workings of that relationship are pointing towards you having a more passionate control over your expectations of this other person. Yeah. You either love them in a way that they can handle it at this time, or you don't, right?
Exactly.
So patience and tolerance on your part may provide an avenue of deepening commitment for him on his part.
Maybe, yeah. That would be more relaxed, maybe. And then he's like, oh, maybe you'll get Yeah, he's funny.
You know, channel all your passion into the love making.
He doesn't want to do that anymore.
Well,
He says.
then do it. Then in giving love to each other. Love making isn't all about sex. It's about thinking of the other person first.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, you know, that's got to work both ways, though. It's got to work both ways.
Well, for me,
he's got to think that about you, and you've got to think that about him.
Those feelings have died off a little bit. Those feelings have died off a little bit.
Whose? On his part or your part?
My part.
Well, then maybe you know,
it's interesting, right?
A couple of options present themselves. Maybe you should let go of the relationship and look for somebody who's going to respond to you in a way that is more appropriate to your passion.
Yeah.
Okay? And let him expand into another relationship that is more appropriate to his feelings and his sense of what is right for him. Are you afraid to do that?
I'm not quite ready to move on. That's true.
Okay,
I do love him.
Well, there you go. So you need to really begin to make specific choices that will help both of you have the freedom to express the way you need to express, but also have the freedom to move on, as you put it, into areas that might be more productive and more
better fit.
There you go, better fit. Okay. Maybe that's the hesitancy on his part, is he doesn't feel it's a good fit. But you can still be friends, you just don't want to be lovers.
Well, yeah, but friends and lovers are a little bit complicated. Friends, lovers.
Well, then just you know, let each person go their own way. You don't have to share all the friends. You don't have to be friends. I mean, you don't have to be enemies, but you don't have to constantly be around each other either. You know, sharing the same social circle.
No, we don't. He's not a very social person either.
Good. All right. So I think you know what your options are, and I think that you have the ability.
There are different options.
You know, and so I think it's something you already have the answer to. You're just not willing to make specific steps.
Well,
you have the options. Your options are you can leave and find someone that's a better fit, or you can stay and increase your levels of tolerance and patience, and not having an expectation that is not acceptable to him or to you. For that.
Right. Yeah. It's
so there you have it.
Do you believe? Do you believe that there's the one, something like you're meant to be with that one person?
No.
In this lifetime?
No. The whole twin flame, twin heart thing is such an abused fantasy in our society these days. Oh my gosh. You know, the twin heart. Oh, he's the one. Yeah, it's not a reality. I mean, it's a fabricated reality based upon people who have an idea of, you know, the ultimate love that they think they're going to have, and so they they affix this ideology upon somebody else. It's like, oh my gosh, he's my ultimate love. He's my twin flame.
He's the one.
He's the one. My twin soul, my twin heart, and it's just
doesn't even
so
exist.
Juvenile. It's so high in egotistic expectation.
What if you're supposed to be with someone? Then
there is no supposed to be with someone. You're supposed to be with yourself first. Make yourself your twin flame, because you don't foist this off on somebody else. You have to be at one with yourself first, and then you discover love. And you don't have expectations of having your love returned in the same way that you're giving it. it's the vive la différence. Really, it's the joy of the
Yeah, I
difference.
like that. That's so healing. Thank you. That's like the more important than anything else that I talked about today. What you just said. It's so liberating. I hate all these things like there's the one, and then it's all like all of a sudden everything is going to happen. It's like one day, this one is going to show up, and this one is going to change your life, and everything is going to change. It doesn't really.
It's just putting a lot of.
Like
it's a setup. That's exactly what it is. But you're setting up to fail.
Exactly, because people are going to disappoint you, and then you're going to think, oh, this is not the one.
That's
but maybe
right.
you're supposed to work through something and learn and stuff like that. Yeah,
that's
thank
right.
you.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that very much. So liberating.
Well, you're very welcome.
There's a good fit and there's not a good fit. You know, that's a better way to looking at it. But
that's right.
I agree.
I agree. The
whole
twin flame, twin heart, twin soul.
Okay, I gotta go. Hold on. Bye.
All right. Bye. All right, and you know, we have these things in our society where we foist our expectations of desire upon other people, and if they don't fit that shoe size, well then we start hammering at their feet to try to make them fit the shoes that we want them to wear. And you know, it hurts. It hurts them. They don't want to wear those shoes. You have to let them wear their own shoes. Okay, you have to let them express and be who they are rather than who you want them to be. This is part of Christ consciousness. We're not forcing people to walk in the footsteps of Christ. We're not hammering our foot so it fits exactly the foot of Christ. We're walking in his footsteps. We're not trying to match the foot. We're following the path. And that path is for freedom of expression for a person. Hang on, I have to get a drink here. All right, and so I want to come back a little bit to this wheat and the chaff thing, and I want to thank Felicia Stark for reprinting this. I couldn't get to it, because of the way this information comes through me. And a woman named Megan Correll wrote this, and she says there's nothing wrong with using present and previous beliefs as a point of reference, such as being raised Christian, things, or as Rosemary was discussing with being in the sisterhood. If there's nothing wrong with doing that, as long as you're able to separate the wheat from the chaff. There we are. And the example of wheat or truth in the Bible, the kingdom of heaven is within you, is actually a universal truth, which we will call the wheat. And the example of lies that you might find in the Bible or any spiritual book, but we'll use the Bible at this point, is when men fight with one another and the wife of the one draws near to rescue her husband from the hand of him who is beating him and puts out her hand and seizes him by the private areas, the testicles, then you shall cut off her hand. That would be chaff. That would be a lie. That would be false. And as the Kundalini begins to bring you closer to your divine nature, you will no longer be confused or seek answers from external sources. You'll be guided by the grace and the Kundalini, or, as our example, from within the Christ consciousness. So thank you, Megan, for writing. That's very appropriate. And thank you, Felicia, for reproducing it here so that I could share it with people. Okay, and so we have another question here. And Ayman Hamoud from Syria, he says, I had the feeling of something walking on my head, and that caused me some chills the past few days. It occurred during sleep before going to sleep. I try to express my acceptance of it through the mantra, I give myself to you, my Kundalini, but it seems that whenever I notice it, it stops. Can you talk about that? Well, okay, yeah. Head dancers. These are head dancers, and these are part of an activation sequence with the Kundalini. It will literally feel like some little thing is walking on your head, like a bipedal, walk, walk, walk. Imagine a little elf or a little tiny being, like say 6 inches tall, walking on top of your cranium, and specifically around the fontanelle area. And this is good. Amen. This is great. Let that occur. Don't feel like you're being possessed or anything like that. This is fine. This is good. This is healthy. These are called head dancers, and they are an indication of activation, Amen. So continue to practice those safeties, as I know you're doing, and continue to trust in the Kundalini that is coming up and being activated within you. Okay? Invite the head dancer. Don't try to catch it. Don't try to like take a picture of the head dancer, right? Just let it be. When it comes is when it comes. It's not for you to focus on. It's for you to experience in a gentle way, but not try to pinpoint it with your beta brainwave consciousness. It would be more of an opportunity for your alpha brainwave consciousness. So when you're in kind of an altered state, or right before sleep, you'll probably feel it, or in a state of consciousness, a state of mind that isn't as focused on the linear world as some of the other states of consciousness would be. And it's definitely a good sign and symptom of grace within you. Amen. So, yeah, you go. You're doing well. This is great. Good to read. Good to read. Okay, all right. And moving onward here, I don't see if there's anybody else here asking a question. Thank you for telling me the sound is okay. I appreciate that. And great. So, once again, if you have a question and you want to call in, the number is area code 347-850-8464. And if you have a question and you're listening on Facebook, go ahead and respond to that thread. Let's see. Can you speak about women empowerment within Kundalini? Well, women are actually equally empowered as men. It's just part of the Christ consciousness is you're not you're not separating. There's no gender separation with regards to power. There might be different expressions of power, but it is not one being more powerful than the other. The mother has to do her job. She holds the developing child. She gestates the developing child. She gives birth to that child. She nourishes that child. She and he, the two parents, raise that child. And so in a Kundalini context, the power is equal. And that is how it is. It's 50-50. Nobody is more powerful because of a gender than anybody else. It's important for people to understand that. Female empowerment is, well, the whole planet here is feminine. And I know the men are kind of go, well, wait a minute, I'm no woman, and but you are the product of a woman, and you were carried by a woman, and you were nurtured in the womb of a woman. Okay, this planet is feminine, and this planet is really a planet of opportunity. The planet Earth, Terra, in the solar system, is a planet where we are being conditioned towards having the experience of divine consciousness, divine flesh. Even the ET that come here and visit here are part of that understanding. They know that in this place here, we are allowed to evolve into divine consciousness. And that is a big deal. Remember what I was saying about Christ having one foot in heaven, one foot on earth. That is the deal. That is the divine flesh, the Word of God made flesh. Okay? And you can't have one without the other. And so part of the Word of God made flesh is to be a product of sacred femininity and sacred masculinity. 50-50, equal power, equal sharing of power, equal expression of power, equal in every aspect. Excuse me. Important for people to understand that. It's no longer the law of the jungle where you have the big man with the big muscles, with the big spear or the big club saying, I will take power here because I can do it forcefully. Excuse me. I can take power by force, therefore I shall. This is not Kundalini consciousness or Christ consciousness. That is brute consciousness, which is still, in a huge level of expression here on this world right now. But we're changing that with the Kundalini. The Kundalini itself is changing that. As people go through the different lives of refinement, they work themselves up the ladder, or shall we say, up the mountain of refinement, going through levels. They start out as a brute in one life, and maybe they're not so brutish the next life, and maybe they're not a brute at all in the life after that, and so on and so forth. They refine themselves towards noble behaviors. The noble behaviors open up doors of wisdom. They partake of that wisdom, and as they partake of that wisdom, they eventually reach the Kundalini, and the Kundalini gives them divine wisdom. You understand? And they start listening to divine teachings. They start expressing divine understandings. And as they express those divine understandings, it changes their soul. It changes how they are and who they are and what they are and why they are. Okay? And this is how evolution on this planet is. This is what happens. This is how we evolve from the brute animal into a person that is able to hold the high frequencies of heaven on the one hand and still hang on to the tree with the other hand. The two that are one and the one that is two. You cannot place more emphasis on one or the other. It must be equal. It must be equal. And so there is no such thing as feminine empowerment in Kundalini. No such thing as feminine empowerment within Kundalini. Because the feminine never lost power in the first place. So there's never a need to gain back that which was never lost. Femininity is always a constant 50-50. 50% feminine, 50% male. Just as we are all 50% feminine and 50% male in our physical bodies. Okay. Power sharing is equal within the Kundalini among the genders. It is absolutely equal. And so you really need to understand that. For those of you that, in the Me Too movement, or the movement that is, around femininity taking back its power. Well, true femininity never lost its power. Society, on the other hand, unevolved, or should not unevolved, but mundane society is what has tried to remove power from a woman, calling femininity the weaker sex, because she's not as much of a brute as the male of the species. That is something that a person is socially or societally trained to inflict or to receive. Within Kundalini, there is no power lost from the woman. She is Shakti. She is sacred feminine. She is powerful beyond belief, as is sacred male. Powerful beyond belief. And those two unbelievable powers come together to form the divine flesh. Semi-divinity within a hominid on this planet. Hominid meaning a human being. The flesh made divine. The Word of God, goddess, made divine upon the flesh of the human. Semi-divinity. Half here, half in heaven, at the same time. If you know what a Vesica Pisces is, and I think I've mentioned this in one of the other recent programs, where the two circles, when two circles come together, right at the beginning of the merge of those two circles, an oval area is created that looks very much like a vagina, like a vaginal opening. And that is where the Kundalini person stands. Two worlds at the same time, creating three worlds. The two that are one and the one that is two. We stand in the middle of those two worlds, partaking of both, which in and of itself creates a third world. That third world is heaven and earth at the same time. That is the flesh made divine. That is heaven and earth existing in a living organism simultaneously. All right. If you have any other questions that you'd like to ask, call in. The call-in number is 347-850-8464. And the chat room is up, and we have a few people in the chat room. Brenda's there, Eamon's there, Felicia's there, Kundalini Life is there, Purificator's there, Tommy's there, Tomei, I hope that's Tomei, and Zura Zoide is there. So welcome to everybody, and thank you for participating in this program. I'm going to go over to yes, I'm going over to Facebook here to see if anybody else has asked a question there on that one thread. It looks like we're clear and clean. So I want to say thank you to everyone for joining us. For those of you that missed us, of course, go to the archives and listen to the program again. This program has mainly been about the Christ consciousness and how that is actually Kundalini consciousness. Okay. Thank you for listening, everyone, and I'll end it the way we started it. And here we go.